Welcome to Gather In, where you'll hear stories of conversion to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. If you have an interesting story to tell, please go to our Instagram page or send us an email to gatherin@proton.me. Welcome to Christian McOmber. We met recently on Instagram, and I've been looking at your posts on Instagram, and even read the first 5 chapters of your book recently. So it was a quick read. I love your book. What I've read so far. I mean, I think it's something like 50 chapters, and they're relatively short. Well, the ones I've read are relatively short chapters. So, you know, it's a quick, easy book to read. So, look, we'll get into more detail about the book a little bit later. But I just want to say what a great book I think it is, and I'm hoping people who join us today will click on Amazon or whatever they use to buy your book and get onto it, because it's just a great read. So welcome, Christian. It's good to have you here. How's your day been today? What have you been doing?
I work in advertising, so just a long day of writing commercials. One thing that's nice though is my son always comes in and jumps on me in the morning, and then we go downstairs and kind of hang out for a bit. So that's probably the highlight.
Absolutely. How old is he? Almost.
He's
3.
almost 3.
Oh, that's a fun age. That's a fun age. Yeah, a very fun age. So, it's great to have you here. And your son's not going to come and join us here, is he? He might.
He just
Well, look, that'll just add to the fun. That'll just add to the fun. So,
True.
From our brief chat the other day, I'm going to give you a quick intro for you, and you tell me if I get things wrong, because my memory's not that good, as you know. But Christian is a young married man in his early 30s, served a mission in Brazil about 10 or 11 years ago or so. Met his wife, had a long-distance romance. You can tell us a little bit about that later, I think. It should be interesting. And as Christian has already mentioned, is an advertising executive, writing freelance, sorry, you're not freelance now. You're employed and working on writing advertisements for different companies, I guess. I don't know, but anyway, we might talk about that in a little while. But and you grew up as a member of the church in California, I understand.
So, 99% of that's true. I grew up in Seattle, but I have been living in California for the last, 8-9 years. So I can see why. Yeah, I pretty soon I'll spend much of my life in California.
Yeah. Okay. A little bit warmer down in California. And what part of California are you in? Is it Los Angeles? Okay.
Yeah, Los Angeles.
Okay.
So.
Wow.
The city of angels.
Well, someone's just joined us, Denise Fannin. I'm not sure if she's a friend of yours, but she says she's from Seattle too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Seattle,
welcome, 100%. Denise. And you might see the light one day and move to California too. Who knows? Okay.
Hey, we'd love it.
Christian, what I always like to get my guests to tell us about is your early life, because I think your early life is really foundational to how you turn out in later life. So if you could just tell us a little bit about your life growing up in Seattle, tell us a little bit about your family, and perhaps get to the point of how you came to serve a mission down in Brazil. That'd be really interesting for listeners to know, I think.
Yeah. So for me, when I was a little baby, my dad held me for the first time, and he thought to himself, this is my chance to prepare a future missionary. And from the time I was very little, I was already memorizing scriptures and learning about missionary work. My dad was very excited about it. For maybe some of your older listeners, they may remember the the Brother Brown tapes. I was raised up on the Brother Brown tapes.
No, I think
Have you
I'm
heard of
probably
those?
too old to know about those.
There you go. So, I mean, yeah, I was learning about missionary work before Preach My Gospel. Preach My Gospel came out right before I went to serve. But as far as my family, you know, we grew up in Seattle. My dad served his mission in Scotland, which I think is part of why he was such a lifelong missionary. The place he lived looked just like his mission. And so it was very natural for him to just share the gospel wherever he went. But he also, like I said, really saw raising children as an opportunity to, as President Nelson would say, turn your home into an MTC. And so that's what he did. And my mom, she's the classic tiger mom. She's a warrior. She's like a stripling warrior's mom. She, you know, whenever I'd play football, she'd be like the loudest one cheering. And then going down the line, I'm the oldest. I have my brother just younger than me. His name is Gregory, and he is autistic. He's nonverbal. So that was kind of a huge blessing and a huge challenge for us growing up, having a younger brother who's autistic and unable to communicate fully. But it's something that we all really embraced, and I think a huge part of that is because we had the benefit of this knowledge of the pre-earth life. We knew that, you know, our brother, he was with us before we came to earth. We chose this. We chose this family. We chose this life. And knowing that, you know, he's like, his condition is not like the source of genetic mutation, but really it's part of God's divine plan. And entering that challenge, knowing there's something to learn from this, was really formative for me and forced me to be a leader in sometimes very stressful situations. But I had support. I had my younger brother Justin, just younger than him, and then my youngest sister Heather, who's 9 years younger than I. So that's my family. And then I was the first to serve a mission on both sides of my extended family. I come from 28 aunts and uncles between my dad's family, my because they each have 7 kids, and then 7 kids married. They all have
Yep.
wives and husbands, which makes 14, and then between both sides, 7 kids, it multiplies very quickly. So I grew up in this clan of McOmbers, and Arnesons is my mother's maiden name. Yeah, all active, all strong, growing up at least, and then yeah, that's
Okay.
kind of my early
That's
formative years.
interesting. This is all in Seattle, and your
Yeah,
family
this
is
is all in
still in
Seattle.
Seattle, most of your family, or?
Yeah, the vast majority. Since I've been older, some of my aunts and uncles have moved around. I think 2020 was a caused a big diaspora of people leaving from the West Coast and kind of heading further inland. But it's been yeah, it was really
Yeah.
great to have strong
Yeah.
roots early on in
Tell
life.
me, you know, growing up as you did with such great family support and you know, actively participating in church activities and Sunday worship programs and things like that. Did you feel that you practiced your religion in the home? I'm guessing this mini MTC thing was, you know, pretty full on, or how was it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say it was pretty full on. My dad would come in the morning, and even before seminary, he'd wake me up by reading the first Strength of Youth to me, which is good. I had the whole thing memorized as a teenager. When I got into situations that I knew were like outside those guidelines, I was like, I better get out of here. um, and then yeah, it was a huge blessing to have that, especially from my
Yeah.
dad. Just this very constant um, mentorship from him, and then and it we could just kind of see the gospel in everything. As far as my aunts and uncles, I had aunts and uncles that were very strong and active, and I have aunts and uncles who, you know, spent time outside the gospel or made different choices. And it was a really nice case study early on in life to see those who kept the commandments you could see very clearly how keeping the commandments affected both themselves and even their children. And those who didn't keep the commandments, how that affected themselves and their children. And so for me, growing up with my family and then growing up, I was in an area where we're definitely in the minority, being a faithful Latter-day Saint Christian member of the church. And so there were a lot of opportunities to share the gospel. I recognize that. And having the large family around me, it was very clear to see I do need a Think Celestial hat.
I just saw that too. I just need a hat. It doesn't matter, any hat,
I know. Okay, Huber hats. I need to message Huber hats because he's got a hat for me. I need to get the Think Celestial hat.
Okay, so your dad's a returned missionary, served in Scotland. Did your mum also serve a mission?
She did not. She didn't serve a mission. She got into missionary work more once she met my dad.
Your dad?
It's hard to be around my dad.
Your dad sounds like quite the character, quite the gung-ho sort of member, just wants to share the gospel with everyone, and you've inherited his genes, huh?
Yeah, I'd say so. The apple didn't fall far from the tree on that one.
Look, through your teenage years, a lot of people, and it's very common that we all go through our teenage years. And I grew up not as a member of the church. I'm a convert. I was 24 years old when I was baptised and confirmed a member of the church. And I went through a rebellious teenagehood. And a lot of Latter-day Saint teenagers also go through some sort of questioning phase. Who am I? Where am I? Do I really want to go on a mission or not? How did you navigate through those years?
It's a great question. I would say the excitement for the mission really influenced my choices. So I would say I'm of like the chaotic good persuasion. Like I think there's a lot of people who, they're very rule bound and I wasn't that way. For me, I was very open minded. I was always like trying different things. I visited other churches. I explored like other belief systems. I went to, and honestly, as a teenager, like looking back, I loved to dance and I loved to play football. And sometimes I would find myself in parties or places where, it's not really a place where the Spirit abounds. And I was lucky enough to have the guidance of the Spirit to be able to recognize, this isn't where I should be. And I think as I stayed close to the Spirit and as I strive to prepare myself to serve God, it made a lot of those decisions more clear. Now, of course, like anyone, I had various stages of rebellion, and maybe in my appearance or in how I expressed myself, or even just being a hot-headed teenager. But I never lost sight of the mission, and I always made sure that any choice I was making wouldn't disqualify me from the mission. For me, like because I grew up in my dad's stories, and my dad, the way he talked about Scotland, you would think it was like Narnia. It's like this whole other place. And when I was 9 years old, I went and visited my dad's mission. And so I was so wrapped up in my dad's stories, it was hard to imagine a future where I wasn't a missionary myself. And so I think having that focus and knowing that I needed to put God first and go serve a mission really helped me to make better choices in my teenage years.
Okay. And so at some point, you actually got to the point of having an interview with the bishop, starting the process of the paperwork. Was it still paperwork back then? It wasn't all online like it is now?
Oh yeah, it was like analog. There were parts of it that were printed out and done, and parts of it that were I went on a mission, I would say, during the transition into this more digital sphere that we're finding missionaries in today. And so I remember like photocopying and uploading it to like the website. There were like forms I had to like photocopy, but there was quite a bit of it that I did
Yeah.
online
So,
going back.
so how did you actually get to that point of starting that process?
Another great question. I would say in my stake, at the time when I was serving, Gordon B. Hinckley had put out this
Mhm.
charge that they were
Yeah.
raising the bar. They were elevating who could serve and how they could serve. And so I actually went to my stake president, and I saw a lot of my friends in like a few years before me. They got held back, and they spent months like preparing. And I didn't want to be one of those people. I wanted to arrive as soon as possible. I had like mapped out in my mind where I would be when I would be. And so I went to my stake president at like 17 and a half. And I was like, I'm a year and a half out. What can I do now to prepare? I was
Mhm.
I was obviously very excited about serving. And so he gave me some pointers, gave me some things to work on. And by the time, about 4 months before my birthday, I had my papers all ready to go and shipping
Okay.
off.
Okay. So you got your mission call. Was it a huge family gathering? Like I'm sort of imagining it probably was when you got your mission call. Is that right?
So the funny thing is my mission call arrived in Seattle, but I was actually
Okay.
at
Okay.
BYU, Utah. And so and so I thought it would be a good idea to have my brother open my call
Okay.
and read it to me. So I didn't have the piece of paper in my hand, but I had a really close relationship. Like I said, growing up with an autistic brother and the parents that we
Sure.
had, and just the situation that we had. I really had to rely on my younger brother because whenever it's date night, like we're on duty. And my parents would go, they would like go on vacations in other countries, sometimes for a couple weeks, and that was like I was like running the house as like a 13-year-old sometimes. So it was like I really relied on my brother, and so we have this really really close relationship that continues today. And having him read my call to me of where I would go was a really cool moment, and it was great because I had all my aunts and uncles in Seattle and all my cousins, and they were all there in Seattle listening in. And then at school, I had all my college friends, so
Mm,
I was kind of in two places at
yeah.
once when I received the
And
call.
how did you initially feel when you heard those words? You've been assigned to serve in the which mission in Brazil? I can't remember. Sorry.
No worries. There's like 38 missions in Brazil. So I served in the Maceió
Say that.
mission, which I didn't know
Say
how to
that again for
pronounce when I
me.
received it, but I know now. So I
Okay.
served in Maceió.
I'm just going to say.
That's
I'll stick with Brazil. Yeah.
Maceio. Yeah, it's fine. You can stay with Brazil. I get it.
Okay. So, what sort of, on a scale of 1 to 10, what was your initial level of excitement when you read that?
Oh, I was incredibly excited. Truth be told, I'd always imagined going to the Philippines. In Seattle, there's a really strong Filipino uh, population, and so I thought, oh, maybe I'll go there. So I was just happy that I knew where I was serving, and so when I found out it wasn't the Philippines, there was a moment of like, oh, it's not where I had always dreamed of going, but Brazil. And I had an uncle who had served in Brazil, so I was familiar with it. I'd heard some of his stories as a kid, and so I was very excited to open my call to Brazil. But it was really being in the country and being with the people where I realized what Brazil is
Mm,
really all about.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's an incredible place
I,
filled with
I
really
can
incredible
imagine.
people.
I've never been to South America. The closest I've got to South America is to Mexico City.
Still
Yeah,
in North
yeah,
America technically,
still
yeah.
North America, but look, I can imagine it's a fascinating place, and you had an amazing mission experience there for 2 years, which I've started reading about, obviously, in the first two chapters of your book. Now, in your time as a missionary there, I'm guessing that you kept a very detailed journal. Is that correct?
You know, I did keep a detailed journal, and I'm grateful that a lot of my companions kept even more detailed journals. But as far as writing my book, I relied
Oh,
largely on my own memory. And then after, because I just have one of those memories where I just remember everything. And so I remembered everything. And then after I wrote my book, it took me about a year to write. And then I spent 6 months after that calling companions, talking to my converts, being like, okay, so it happened like this, and then this happened, and we like cross reference between each other. And then I did write detailed emails home for the first year. And then you get busier and they get shorter and shorter and shorter. And back then we didn't talk to your family regularly on the phone. So once you're out for about a year, you start I don't know, it's this strange thing. You start having like your memories of your family in the language that you talk in now, and you remember them differently than they actually look. If you haven't seen them for so long. So yeah, I don't know. It was a very
yeah,
different
yeah.
experience.
So, would you advise young missionaries going out in the field now that keeping a detailed journal is important?
I I definitely would, especially if you're gonna write a book later. um, I wish I kept a more detailed journal, honestly. And I think I also I discovered um, this new form of daily journaling, which I do now. If you're really busy, because missionary work is very time intensive and it requires a lot of anticipating the needs of many people you're teaching, and depending on where you serve, for part of my mission, I was essentially a branch president for a few months, and so that was also just very time consuming. But if you can just write down like a line that reminds you of a story, or went to this person's house, did this, like even if you can get something in every day and make journaling a daily thing, it can definitely positively impact your life, and you can look back
Yeah,
and see how you've grown
yeah.
over time. But the more
I think
details, the better, for sure.
that's great advice. I think I mentioned to you the other day that my wife and I recently returned from serving as senior missionaries in the Australia Brisbane mission, and I think right from the start, I started doing a weekly blog, and fortunately, my wife kept she wrote, she had a book. She wrote in the book, hand wrote everything in the book, and I would use whatever she wrote, whatever we had in our diary, our planner, and whatever my memories were. So I'd write each week a sort of summary, a daily summary of the week. And, I certainly didn't write everything that we did. If anyone read my blog and thought, oh, this is all that the Ceffs did while they were away, well, they didn't do very much, because you just can't write everything because it's very time consuming. But yeah, that's the modern way, I think, of keeping a record of your mission. And quite a few of the senior missionaries were doing something similar, although I didn't see any of them that did it every week. I think I'll pat myself on the back and say I, I did a reasonable job of that. And part of the reason I did that is because I've looked back on my journals from when I served as a young missionary in the New Zealand Christchurch mission, and I read it now, and I think, oh, it's like reading someone else's journal. It's like most of it I can't remember. So it'd be interesting with you. You've got a really good memory from what you say. It'll be interesting to see how you are in 30 years' time, if you still remember the stuff that you do now. But I just think it's very, very important to keep some record. The more detailed, the better. But keep something. Handwritten journal. I guess missionaries can't really do missionaries don't have access to blogging websites, but yeah, we did, so that was easy for us. But some sort of record is fantastic. Yeah. So and
Agreed.
so what you described a little while ago is the process you went through in putting together your book. What's the real motivation for you in doing the book? You're obviously a successful young man. You're working in advertising. You're earning thousands and thousands of dollars a week. You don't need the book for the money, do you?
No, it's definitely not a money motivation. There's much faster ways to make money than writing a book
That's
about
right. So what's
missionary.
your
I'll
real
tell you that right
motivation
now.
behind it?
My real motivation in creating this book is sharing a blueprint for younger missionaries, or preferably for future missionaries, to look at the way I served. And I wasn't a perfect missionary, and you see that in my book. I make mistakes, but I hope that they can learn from my mistakes, stand on my shoulders, and take the future of missionary work bigger, bolder, better than it's ever been before. And I wanted to share this story because while I wasn't the perfect missionary, I did reach my goals, and I experienced the impossible. I saw miracles. I saw I saw a branch go from 20 people to
Wow.
120 in a period of just 6 months. I I saw another branch. I saw 30 people get baptized over the period of a few months, and a whole chapel was constructed to house all of the people that were coming into the church. And the things I learned as a missionary, one of the things that my mission president believed in very strongly, he would tell us, there's no such thing as a bad area, only bad missionaries, which is really harsh. It's like harsh to hear, like, oh, I'm completely responsible for, you know, how I spend my time and how many people I can help to come unto Christ. And he would prove this by taking missionaries who'd found success in another area and putting them in areas where it was impossible. And he did this tactic of taking missionaries and putting them in impossible areas and watching them thrive. And we would see it over and over and over again. And I can't say that I was, obviously I was very motivated to serve a mission, but I didn't arrive knowing everything I needed to know in order to baptize every week and help others come unto Christ at this quickened pace that I learned as a missionary. But I was very blessed in the companions that I had and in the places that I went to serve early on. So when I did reach those impossible areas, I had all the tools to find that success and find those who are preparing. And now that I know these things, see, I came home from my mission and I decided I have a goal, and I would recommend this for every missionary that comes home from your mission. I would recommend, as soon as you get home, you take however many people you baptize as a missionary, and you 10x that, and you turn it into a life goal. So, for example, if you baptized 50 people as a missionary in 2 years, then you should, in my opinion, you should go, okay, I'm going to set a goal to help 500 people now, and make your life goal. Try to find all those people, try to help all those people, and keep in touch with those you baptize. That put me on a path that I'm on now. I guarantee you I would have never written this book, except that when I came home, I set new goals. I decided I'm going to help even more people. And when I came home, I went out with the missionaries because I had this goal and I had to achieve this goal. And so even though I was navigating that post-mission life of finding a wife, which I'm sure we'll get to later, finding a wife, starting off your career, I never put missionary work on the sideline. I always kept it a central focus of my life. Grew up with a dad that was very much like that. And because I had that as a central focus, because of my goals, I learned that what was true in Brazil is true here in the US. And because I went into advertising, I've lived in Seattle, Los Angeles, New York, Dallas, Texas, Utah. Everywhere I go, I can help people come unto Christ and get baptized. And I've helped many people come unto Christ. And the some of the biggest challenges that I face in helping others come unto Christ is working with missionaries who have less experience. Because when you come home from your mission, you're not the missionary anymore. You need them to help people set goals. You need them to follow up with people because you're too busy. You have too many things to focus on. And so I wanted this book to be an immersive story that would get young future missionaries excited to learn these lessons, to put these things in practice. And I hope that they can learn from that experience and be even better. And so that's why I initially wrote the book. And then the book led to the beginning of Missionary Universe, which led to it was like I don't know, I'm like on a journey with God. So a little long-winded response, but hopefully that answers some of your questions.
That's really interesting. You know, one of the things that struck me as I read the first few chapters was that I think this book would be a good book for non-members to read. Perhaps not all non-members, but perhaps those maybe who the missionaries are teaching, perhaps, or some who are a little bit interested and not sure. But I think it's a great story. I was just thinking then of a friend of mine called Dennis Schleicher. I'm not sure if you know Dennis, but he's a gay Latter-day Saint, and he wrote a book called "Is He Nuts? Why would a gay man join the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?" And I read his book, and he tells the story of his conversion. And it's part of the reason I started this podcast, actually, is listening to Dennis. He's just a great guy. I love him. And reading his book, it just follows that step-by-step process that people he met followed to help him become a member of the church. It's just a great read, and I'd recommend anyone to read it. And, I'm thinking that your book probably has a lot of those conversion stories in it. And we can see what processes people went through, not a prescribed process, but, something that was perhaps organic and it just happened, or maybe you did follow a set process. I don't know. But, I think the more we read these things, the better. And I think it would be good for some non-members to read in some situations, perhaps. What do you think about that?
I think that's really fascinating. I can tell you, when I wrote this book, I wanted to widen the aperture. So, you could be a convert and read this book, or you could, like you said, be a non-member. I didn't use a lot of the terminology that we use in the church. Like I called them congregations as much as possible. And I tried to refer to the various callings within the church in a way that people would understand them. I definitely wanted, and I'm glad you bring this up, because I do think for so many people, the view of religious individuals in pop culture is, it's become almost a cliche in Hollywood. If there's a pastor in a TV show, eventually he's going to be evil. Like eventually it's going to happen. And it's like, why are we doing this? Like, why are we making pastors and religious leaders seem bad? And the way that it's like there was a $5 million whatever SEC thing, right? The church donates $1 billion to humanitarian aid, and that's just scratching the surface of all the things the church does. I wanted my book to be something where if it did reach a mass audience, it's something that could gain traction. I have read a lot of books that were also, like anything that happens with God, he works with us very organically, right? He gives us little experiences here and little experiences there, and they prepare us for meeting missionaries or following him in some great way, right? Like Lehi had this vision, but even before he had this vision, he was Lehi. He was following God. He was, and God was preparing him. And I think he does that with each of us. And the more you make those choices to follow him, the more he prepares. And I think a really great example of this is within the first 5 chapters, you meet Maranilda, and she is, oh, sorry, I used her real name.
Oops.
You meet Alma. She would be okay with me using her real name. The reality is my publisher was like, you need to change all the names, which is fine. But Alma, you meet her and you see how the Lord is preparing her the same way he prepared me to go on a mission. He's preparing her to meet the missionaries. She's having little experiences here and there, and one of those key moments actually comes from a pastor on the radio. He says, for those of you who don't have a church, who are looking for your church, go out and find it, find where you belong. And she hears this, and within a few days, my trainer, I haven't arrived in the mission yet. I'm in the MTC while all this is happening. I'm literally preparing to be a missionary. She's literally preparing to meet me. And after hearing this pastor, she receives an invitation to a Bring a Friend to Church Sunday, which is something that my trainer brought. And it was very successful. They had a lot of people at church. And when I first arrived, my very first week, we went and visited all of those people. And I remember going to these different people and inviting them to follow Jesus Christ and to set goals with God. And some people would say no. And instinctively, I thought, well, they're just saying no because they don't know enough. If I tell them more, if I can convince them to believe, it's a very common temptation. And when we do that, two things happen, right? You're one, like they've already told you no, like, and you're bothering them, right? It's the Sam I Am thing, right? You're coming to them over and over and over again. And then two, like that's time you could be spending with someone who is prepared. And this became very apparent to me early on when we met Maranilda Alma, when we met Alma, because Alma receives us and she is like, I had this pastor who told me this. I went to church and I felt this incredible feeling. And I remember we're teaching her and the light is coming in through the window, like onto her face. And it was just this angelic moment and us saying, will you follow the example of Jesus Christ and be baptized by one holding the proper authority of God? And she said yes. And we said, will you be baptized on this day? And she said yes. And as soon as I realized there are people out there who you will invite and they will say yes, I realized I just need to get to that invitation as fast as possible. I need to get to that invitation. And if people say no, I can ask why not, right? I can explore their reasons. I can hear their thoughts. And if I can respond to those, then sure. But really our job, the field is white, already to harvest. There's people all around us who are ready to receive the gospel. All they're waiting for is an invitation. And it's not our job to like prepare these people. The Lord prepares these people. And so to your point, who is this book really for, right? Of course I wrote it with young men in mind, but young women who are thinking of serving a mission. But the reality is, if you are following Jesus Christ,
there he is.
That's my son right there.
Future missionary.
Future missionary.
You can bring him on camera and introduce him if you want to. That's fine.
Titus, want to come over here and meet my friend? He's talking about a jet ski. So to get back to my point and answering your question, I know I took the scenic route to answer it, but I do love what you say in that, this could be a good book for anybody who is thinking of joining the church or wanting to know what missionaries do. You look around, you see these missionaries knocking doors all over the place, and some people hide from them. And I think that's really sad. I think if you really understood that these people are donating 2 years of their life and lots of their own personal time, money, and energy to help others come unto Christ, it's worth at least listening to them. And even if you say no, at least you had that chance. At least you gave yourself that chance. And so I would definitely recommend this book to somebody. And I guarantee you, people who aren't members of our faith, who read this book and who feel that the truth of the gospel in it, I think it could lead them to set their own goals with God and follow
Let's
him.
Let's hope so. So you've been home from your mission now 10 or 11 years, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like 11 years. It's hard to keep track after 10.
So you came home and somewhere along the line you met your wife.
Oh yeah. This is a fun story. So, as a missionary, I learned to invite boldly and find those who are prepared for you. And at the very end of my mission, like the last 3 weeks, I'd always dreamed of marrying a returned missionary. I was really excited. I thought I'd be marrying a missionary who returned it, 22 and a half or 23 is when I was young, up to 21. And then in my last 3 weeks, the announcement was made, hey, we're lowering the mission age. All these 19-year-old girls are going to go on missions. And I was ecstatic. I was like, this is amazing. This is going to like up my chances of finding a return missionary. Like the Lord is preparing the way for me. What I didn't realize is that coming home right after that occurred would mean that all of my most valuable prospects to marry would all be immediately putting in their papers to go serve as a missionary. So all the girls that I wanted to marry were immediately off the market. So that put me, the whole time I was at BYU, there were like freshman girls and girls that were leaving on a mission. So I didn't find anybody at BYU, and I spent years in singles wards in various cities as I was trying to find my way in advertising. And I was kind of reaching this point. I was like, I may just have to wait a lot longer until I find the girl for me. I'm just not finding her. And then I go to a Super Bowl party on Sunday, which is ironic because a few weeks later, I learned that she didn't want to watch football on Sundays ever, and that wasn't going to be part of our life. So I had to quit my cable. But when I met this girl, she had this long red hair, and she moved like a dancer. And when I started talking to her, I could tell she'd serve a mission. She was very faithful and very excited about the gospel and really everything I was looking for. She's like, but I'm going back to school in 2 weeks. And I was like, I didn't think it was going to go anywhere, but I was like, all right, we'll go on one date. And we're like, since we're going on only one date, we should do something really, really cool. I was like, what about like skydiving? So we decided to go indoor skydiving. There's a place close to her house where you could go indoor skydiving. And once she looked at the price, she was like, I don't know about indoor skydiving. That's like kind of an expensive first date. And she didn't want to put too much pressure on it. But I was like, okay, we could go rock climbing, but if you've got one night, would you rather climb or fly? And she's like, it's up to you. I was like, let's fly. I still didn't think it was going to go anywhere, but I wanted to have fun. But on my first date, I knew she was the one. I could just feel it. I was like, this is the girl for me, whatever hoops I have to jump through. I understood it would probably take her a lot longer to find out I was the one for her. And so I told her, I was like, yeah, you can, go back to BYU, Idaho, and you can date around, and I'm not going to hold you down, but whenever you're in town, we'll have fun. And so that's what we did. I'd fly her back to me, or I'd fly out to her and go see her. And I just kept it fun. I kept it light. And 10 months later, she was like, all right, I guess I've come around to you. I had to put
Okay, so you had a 10-month sort of dating time, courtship, to use the old-fashioned word. You proposed to her, or she proposed to you?
So I did propose to her. I'm old-fashioned that way, I suppose. I feel like it's still common for men to propose, but yeah, I talked to her parents. And I was planning to talk to her dad, and then her mom's like, I want to come too. I was like, come along. So I talked to both of them and got their joint approval while I sent my wife and her younger sister to go get their nails done. Once I had that figured out, this actually took me weeks to pull off, but I took my wife to the very highest tower in Dallas, Texas, the
Okay.
Bank of America Tower. And on the very top floor, I proposed to my wife. She said yes. And the rest is history. We had a 6-month engagement, and then we were married. We ended up doing a party. We did like a marriage ceremony in Utah. We did one in Dallas, Texas with her family, and then we were sealed in the Seattle temple. So
Yeah,
quite the world
well,
tour.
a North American tour anyway.
North American tour for sure.
Yeah, okay, so that's interesting. So how long have you been married now?
We'll be going on 6 years next May, and we've got we've got one little guy right here, and that's what we
Fantastic.
got so far. So we're happy with him, though.
Fantastic. So,
Fun.
look, one thing I did notice after talking to you the other day, you mentioned your YouTube channel, and I had a quick look at your YouTube channel. You have, quite a successful YouTube channel there with a lot of followers, and that is, the purpose of that is to help promote the book, I guess.
Good. It's a good question. Uh, the YouTube channel started because when I started off talking about the book, um, I was talking to some friends who had published, and they said, "Look, you need a following in order to publish." So it started out with thinking like, well, I guess I should start something, and I didn't know if it was what it was going to be. Around the same time, I was actually serving as ward mission leader during 2020, and it was a time when there was a lot of uh, political unrest, social unrest. We were all in lockdown, especially in Los Angeles. It was a really challenging time to do missionary work. Every time we baptized, I had to call the bishop and the mission president and the stake president, and we had to get
Wow.
approval from all three for every baptism. So there was even a time where we were baptizing weekly. So every week and then the government closed down all the churches. They said we couldn't even enter a church. So we had to baptize people in the ocean, or we had to baptize in somebody's pool. And to see our ward mission excel in these circumstances was really inspiring for our ward. And there was another missionary, return missionary from Brazil, who came to me and he said, "Dude, what you're doing here, like, we need to grow it. Like, this is what we need." This is before the spiritual momentum talk, but like, we needed spiritual momentum in our nation, and we could all feel it. And so the fact that I was writing this book, I was already thinking about missionary work. And then I, and like I said, like, even writing the book came from me wanting to help train missionaries and help missionaries to find success, because when I was a ward mission leader, I felt like it was hard for me to relate with the missionaries. Like, I felt like my experience was so different from their experience, and my training was so different from their training. And I've later learned that a large part of this is because when they changed the age, they had this sudden influx of missionaries. And when you have so many missionaries within a mission, you need to take missionaries who are immediately like training, like being trained, and a few transfers later, they're already training somebody new because they have so many missionaries. And so when you do that, it's harder to train missionaries the way I was trained. And so I was trying to relate to this younger generation of missionaries, and especially missionaries who were in lockdown. There was only so much they could do. And so I was trying to relate to them, and I thought, if I could get my experience to other people, then I wouldn't be crazy. I wouldn't be, for some reason, I'm very excited about missionary work. And I think if I get my experience in the hands of others, they'll be excited about missionary work too, was my thought process at the time. But really, the book, the channel, it all comes down to this experience of being in a community where you see this place go from 20 people to 120 in 6 months. And I can tell you those numbers, right? But each of those numbers, there's a story. There's a person who's coming unto Christ. There's lives being changed, addictions being overcome, miracles taking place. And when the world was falling apart in 2020, I was like, I know how to fix this. Like, we can fix the world through the gospel. And so everything I do with my channel, everything I do with the book, it all comes back to that. It all comes back to, how can we fix the world? There's this God-shaped hole in the heart of America, and it's certainly in the heart of the world. And if we can fill that hole, I think we'll have a better world. The millennium is promised to be this amazing place. You look at fourth Nephi, there were no poor among them. I've seen glimpses of it. Um, Later on in the book, you'll discover there was a street in my mission where every single person was a member. and that place was like, it was
Mhm.
like heaven on earth. They were all converts, everyone, this whole street, and it was so pure. It was like the most amazing place I've ever been to. And a kid growing up in Seattle, where so few even believe in God, it was just eye-opening to go to a place like Brazil and see so many people come unto Christ. And when I came home, I was like, I'm going to take what I learned in Brazil and I'm going to put it in practice. I'm going to take
Yeah,
missionary work to the next level.
that's amazing. Christian, I'm not sure if you've seen many episodes of my podcast yet, but what I usually do at about this point is ask people what their most favourite aspect of the gospel or the church or the Saviour, or what their favourite thing is. And I think it's fairly pointless asking you that question. But let me, and this is a question without notice, so I'll give you a minute to think about it. What's your next favourite? What's your next? What's your next favourite? Yeah,
my
what's your next favourite
my next
thing
favorite
about the
my
gospel?
next favorite
And,
thing about the
perhaps I'll
gospel.
leave you think about that for a second, and then perhaps you could blend that into bearing your testimony to finish off with. But before we do that, I just want to encourage people to, number one, hold up your book again, please, Christian. Let us all see a book so we recognise the cover of it. Now, if you go to Amazon, this is where I buy my books. If you go to Amazon and search for With Your Shield or Upon It, it has such an unusual title that it comes up straight away, which is pretty unusual on Amazon. It's usually hard to find things, so you'll find it straight away if you search there. I'd encourage viewers and listeners to go to your YouTube channel particularly, and also to follow you on Instagram. And any of your followers, Christian, who happen to be listening to this today, if you could also follow Gather In Podcast on YouTube and on Instagram and as a podcast, and also on Facebook. So I upload everything onto Facebook, so currently serving missionaries can see that. If it's on any other platform, they can't see it. Struggling to find many viewers on YouTube, having cracked the code there on YouTube, but Instagram is building steadily, and as are the podcast episodes. So, and just encourage that. And Christian, also, before we sign off at the end, I'll tell you about collaboration on Instagram. So at the end of this, I'll send you an invitation to collaborate, and that shares it on your Instagram page as well as on my page straight away. But I've given you
Awesome.
a minute or two to think about your next favourite aspect of the gospel after missionary work, and 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 we'll close off from
Yeah,
there.
and perfect. Before I get into that, yeah, I also have presence on Facebook as well. Many followers on Facebook, so I'd be happy to share this there. And then as far as my second favorite aspect of the gospel, the thing that's beautiful to me about the gospel is that everything's connected. You know, obviously missionary work is so important because it gives others the opportunity to take part in God's plan of happiness. If I had to choose my favorite thing about the gospel, it would be God's plan for each of us, that we, by our choices, can decide in what realm we hope to reside. And for that purpose, I would say my favorite thing about the gospel is actually eternal families, helping families to become eternal. The fact that I can be with my wife for time and all eternity, happily ever after, is the thing that brings me the most joy. And having my son and my children, and I see the people that I served in Brazil and the people that I baptize now as an extension of that family. And so to me, my favorite thing about the gospel is family. And by extension, my second favorite thing is missionary work, which is growing God's family. And with that, I would like to bear my testimony to anyone watching this. I would want you to know that I know that this gospel is true. I know that Jesus Christ lives. I know that he loves us. And I know that as we put our trust in God, as we set goals with Him and help others to do the same, anything is possible. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Christian, thanks again for your time today. It's been fantastic. We'll keep in touch and help each other along the road of promoting missionary work and helping other people hear the gospel, and all the best for the future and things coming along in the future. And hope you have a great day, and thanks to all our listeners for tuning in today. It's been a pleasure having you join us. Thanks again, Christian. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Hurrah for Israel. That's a great one. Thank you. Bye-bye.
If you have an interesting story to tell, please contact us via our Instagram page or send an email to gatherin@proton.me.